I am Corinne Connor, and I hope everybody is here for some math vocabulary. Feel free at any point in time if you have questions or anything that you would like to share, either unmute yourself and just say, hey, I have a question, or something to talk about. Or if you just want to raise your hand, there's that feature on Zoom. So I'll just go ahead and get started. If anyone was in the session that I did this morning, I did talk a little bit about vocabulary and said that I would be delving more into it this afternoon. So like I said, I am Corinne, and I became a staff developer here at the IU last year. So I've been here a little bit over a year. And before that, I was a high school math teacher in Baltimore for 15 years. So I ranged in classrooms from regular education, where I taught GT and a lot of gifted kids. I taught International Baccalaureate. I co-taught in an emotionally disturbed, what we called level 5 behavior classroom. And I taught them Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry 3 years in a row with a really amazing co-teacher. So some of the things that I've learned about vocabulary have come from working with amazing co-teachers in special ed situations, and also in English as a second language or English learner classroom. So there's my contact information if you ever need anything or have any extra questions about anything math related. I also do literacy here at the IU. I am a letters trained facilitator and also a trainer for IIRP, which is the International Institute for Restorative Practices. So feel free to reach out. So I'm sure if you've been in any of the Zooms today, you have seen these, so I'm not going to belabor these points, but I think the last one is, for me, the most important. Nobody gets into the career of education because you want to make money, or you're trying to, do anything other than just help kids. So we always have to assume that everybody comes with the best of intentions. And
hey, Corinne.
Yes.
Hey, it's Jen. I just wanted to say that I can still only see your very first screen. Maybe it's just me. I don't know if everybody else is seeing it, but you're talking through the next couple slides and I don't see them up. So I just wanted to give you that heads up.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jen. Is anybody else only seeing the first? Wow.
It's weird. Like not in present mode yet or something on my screen. It's frozen. Oh, so maybe if you need to stop share and reshare.
Stop and reshare. So is that better? Do you see the
Yeah, now we can see the norms. That's great.
Okay. Weird. And probably because I'm not using my own. I'm in Michelle's office, and hers is different. It's not hooked up with an HDMI. It's hooked up with like a VGA. So it's like I'm hooked up to a projector rather than a dual screen. So it's taking me a little bit of time to get used to this. So
well,
I
apologize. You are good now, so keep rolling.
Thanks, Jen. You're the best. And I don't even know if I hit record. That's the other thing. I think it's recording. Hopefully.
It is.
All right, great.
It's recording.
Yay. All right. So anywho, you guys, I know, again, Act 48 awarded at the end. It's due by Friday, blah, blah, blah. Y'all know that if you've been here today. So I always like to start out with memes. So anybody, especially Lori, Jen, who know me, I just like things to be fun. So if you can just take a look at these memes, I found these, and I found them to be pretty funny for vocabulary, especially the brain one, because I feel that way sometimes. Okay, so we have a few objectives, outcomes, if you will, for today. We're going to talk a little bit about benefits and research of vocabulary, some strategies, and how you can plan for vocabulary instruction in practice. So this is going to include both face-to-face instruction, and then I do have some like ed tech ones in here too that you can possibly use for students if you are coming from a district that is either doing an alternating schedule with remote learning, or maybe you're coming from somewhere that's doing complete remote learning. So again, any questions, just let me know. Okay, so here's a quote from Evelyn Waugh, who does a lot of vocabulary instruction, professional development, and books, just like Isabel Beck. If you've ever read any of her stuff, I have some information from her in here as well. So as you read this quote, we want to think about how we use vocabulary, because that is what really matters. If students aren't hearing the same vocabulary, they lose meaning. And especially in the English language, it's very hard because we have a lot of words that mean the same thing. They're spelled the same. And it's very confusing for either little ones that are learning the language or kiddos that come here from other countries and they're learning English as a second language. So Marilyn Burns, who is another author of vocabulary instruction books, identified that math language has multiple meanings. The way the way that we speak in math can have multiple meanings. We say things like line up, and then we tell kids to draw a line. Okay, those two things can be very different, but they're also the same. You're telling them to line up, you want them to be in a straight line. You're telling them to draw a line. You're wanting them to draw something that resembles the line that they would make when they line up for recess. If they're not using the language, the common math language, then they're going to be confused and they won't understand the multiple meanings. And we're actually doing a disservice to students if we don't explain those multiple meanings. Okay, I'm not sure if anybody's heard of this. These tiers of vocabulary are different than like the ESSA tiers that we talk about, or the MTSS tiers. When we talk about the tiers in vocabulary, okay, they're actually broken also into 3 tiers and is also a triangle, which can sometimes be confusing with that MTSS triangle. But this is just some basic information. Tier 1 vocabulary is your everyday words. Tier 2 is your high utility academic vocabulary. So these are words that are found in across contents, across curricular themes. And then you have words that are what we call tier 3. So they are content and domain specific vocabulary. So it may be a word that is used in other parts of language, but we want specifically the math language when we're talking about tier 3. So this actually also, Isabel Beck talks about this, as does Marzano in his 6 steps of vocabulary instruction. So you always want to think about strategies when you are planning your vocabulary instruction, and you want to make sure that anything that is in this tier 3 domain specific, that you are explicitly instructing students on what these words mean. And we'll talk about that more in the strategy piece. So why do we need vocabulary? Okay. It's very important for academic success. Okay. If you were just in Dr. Powell's keynote for the afternoon, she mentioned that math is also a very strong indicator for whether students are going to graduate or not. It has been shown that vocabulary is very important to reading comprehension, and reading comprehension and having a rich vocabulary is a single biggest indicator of a student's future achievement. So it's the skill of skills. Okay, and that actually came from a USA Today article about student scores and tests. So it was from 2012, so there might be some new studies out there, but okay. It is also important because, again, like I said, reading comprehension is extremely important from young childhood through adulthood. Okay, that again is from Beck and McCune's Bringing Words to Life. Okay, anyone that is familiar with Scarboroughs reading rope? If anybody here teaches any English ELA classes, I'm not sure if you're all math teachers or not, but in case you're not, this is Scarborough's reading rope. Like I said, I am a letters certified trainer. So one of the things that I delve a lot into is the science of reading. So what makes students good readers? And you can see that there are two basic pieces of the rope. There are the language comprehension pieces, and then there's the word recognition pieces. All of them tie together to make this tight rope, and that's what makes a skilled reader, somebody that can actually decode and read any word. And that comes from a lot of these pieces: background knowledge, vocabulary. And then once you have a good background knowledge, once you start making those connections between what a word actually says and what the word means in your vocabulary, it becomes part of what we call your visual word form area. And that's where you actually have your sight recognition. And sight recognition, sight words are not what some people think they are. It's not the same for everyone. So if you were ever given like a list of words and people said, hey, these are sight words for kindergarten kids, everybody's visual word form area is different. So everybody has different sight words. It's words that you recognize on sight. So we recognize the word hippopotamus on sight. Okay, there might be other people that don't recognize that word. So for you, hippopotamus is a sight word. For someone else, it might not be. So just a little bit of information there about, again, why vocabulary is really important to understanding reading comprehension. So benefits to teaching vocab. Okay, so some of the benefits that we see here, obviously if students know the words, the math vocabulary words by sight, you can reach deeper concepts with students because you can talk about things in a richer context. It's very important for you to understand that for some people, again, this is a new language. But for most people, it's not a new language. Sometimes it's just taking a word that they've seen before in another content area and explaining how it relates to math, like the word domain. Okay, people have probably seen the word domain, you know, in other English classes, maybe in social studies class when talking about eminent domain. But the word domain in mathematics is very specific. Okay, it is the set of x values in a function. So understanding the difference between domain in a math context versus domain in another context is really important. So the deeper understanding allows for teachers to be more deliberate and expansive in teaching. And building vocabulary allows for a more complete conversation, not just with the teacher and the student, but with the student and students. Okay, it also is really important because then they can write about math concepts. We always want kids to write things in all of the content areas. You can really find out if students understand math concepts when you're asking them to write about them. So some of the strategies or practices that we talk about when we talk about teaching vocabulary, one of them is explicit instruction. If anybody has watched any work that Anita Archer has done, she is amazing at explicit instruction. I mean, she literally wrote a book about it. So, but in her practice, she says, you want to say the word, define the word, say the word again, use it in a sentence, use synonyms or antonyms, and then you want to practice this with your class. So you want to have them do all of these things with you, and then you want to ask them to find a shoulder partner or, you know, however you do it. Elbow partners, probably not with social distancing right now, right? But somebody sort of close to them, and then you want to have them practice with each other and use the same practice over again. So it seems repetitive, but very important, especially with those tier 3 words. So some other methods to teach vocabulary, especially with little kids, acting things out and modeling what that looks like. When kids can do something that's kinesthetic, sometimes they have more of a chance of remembering. We talk about the Freyer model here, and as we go further and I start talking about the Freyer model, I am going to make the point to say that it is what I call a modified Freyer model for math. We're going to talk about journaling, word walls, mnemonics, math graffiti, and math yapper. Okay, and I put at the bottom, not an exhaustive list. I mean, we do a vocabulary PD that is a full day PD. So, you know, if you are interested in something more on this, we do provide that here at the IU through TAC. So, okay, this is just a standard definition of what we mean when we say acting it out. Pretty sure that you can probably see what that means. You know, getting kids to stand up, getting them to move around is always good for especially the antsy ones. So modified Freyer model. Most people that have seen the Freyer model are used to this box right here being what we call a non-example. For math vocabulary, having this box be a non-example is very confusing for students, especially our students that are English language learners or do not have a very good reading comprehension base. They tend to remember the non-example more than they remember the example, and then it confuses them. So when I talk about the Freyer model, I generally tell teachers, you know, put your word in the middle, make a definition as a class, make it student friendly, make it something they can remember, have them draw an image, do some examples, and then have this be an optional box. Okay, it can be anything that you want it to be depending on what the word is. So they can put something else in there that might help them remember what the word means. One of the geometry teachers that I used to teach with, she did these for all of her tier 3 vocabulary words in each unit. And it's very easy with a subject like geometry because there's a lot of images that you can put in. But one of the things, you know, we talked about as she was observed was, you know, that optional box. So Freyer models, though, are excellent for kids to have. If you have them keep a notebook, like an interactive notebook, they're good to keep. So This is just an example of how we might make one. Let's say if simple interest is something that we're studying, word would go in the middle, definition at the top. Okay, then the formula also in the definition where you're actually telling them what all of the pieces of the formula mean. Here's an image. Okay, and again, you could have them do this as, you know, a little project where they're actually printing pictures out if you would like. And then here's an example of how a simple interest formula would work. And then they did use a non-example here. This is an example of a non-example of what interest is not. This was actually created by someone else, so I would not do this non-example piece. I would probably, or if I did, I would explain why it's not simple interest. So this comes from this book down here that is referenced. So journaling, I'm not sure if any of you guys have your kids do interactive notebooks. I had my students for the last 6 years always keep an interactive notebook where every day they were journaling. We did a lot of this where they would write the steps, or sometimes I actually had the steps written out for them, or they were guided notes with pieces that they would have to fill in. You know, important to make sure that you're scaffolding for what your students need. I always found though that it seemed like whatever you scaffolded for your students that maybe had specific IEP issues, you know, or IEP, whatever, learning disability stuff, accommodations, there's the word, see? Thingy, that thingy. Whatever accommodations I made for students, I generally did for everybody in my classroom anyway, because I felt like it helped all children. So journaling is really good. And again, having kids write about things really makes you know if they understand what they're talking about. Word walls, something that I have seen used very well. And I've also seen them used not so great in the years that I've been an administrator and an instructional coach. It's important for it to actually be part of your instruction. So just having a word wall up there and not ever talking about it or referencing it or making it important, just kind of makes it like a pretty picture on the wall. So you want to make sure that you make it part of your daily instruction, that you are referring to it, that the words are large enough that the students can actually see what they are. This particular one has pictures and words. This one has just the words, but if you notice some of them, like the word parabola is actually in the shape of a parabola. So, you know, doing things like that where you can actually have pictures with the word is very, very helpful for a word wall. Mnemonics, great for people to remember what words mean. One of the examples that we had come up with was for the word perpendicular, thinking about the purple dictionary that's sitting on a shelf at 90 degrees, it's perpendicular to the bookshelf. So teaching kids things like that, or if you're teaching them something with the first letter of the word means something, and that's how you're going to remember. Like if you're talking about word problem strategies and you're using the solve method or UPS check. So UPS would be U is understand, P is problem solve, S is solve, and then check. So when you're giving them ways to remember, it's always helpful for students to have easy ways to remember words that are tough. Another thing that I have seen is having students draw math graffiti. I'm not usually a huge proponent of like teachers pay teachers or anything like that, but I have seen pretty cool. Um, they're called like doodles. I don't know if anybody has ever seen them before, but they have an actual sheet that if you have a student that is a drawer, you know, that really likes to draw while they're taking notes, there's actually pages that you can use that coincide with topics that you might teach that actually have the doodles surrounding the topic or whatever content. So that's pretty cool. But it's kind of like this idea of math graffiti, where you're creating something that they can remember, that vertical angles are angles that are formed when you have two lines that are crossed, or parallel lines are parallel because they are directly beside each other. They never cross, they never touch. And square root. This could be an example of how you can remind students this is the square root sign, and you know, what is a square root. If you've ever seen the game $1,000 Pyramid. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Kathy and Katie. Yep. If you've ever seen $100,000 Pyramid, this is an example of how you could use that, and they call it Math Yapper. So let's say you put a word on the screen, have students pair up, and you're having one student guess. So the person who is doing the actual, you can do it as charades or you can do it as words, but if you do it as words, remember they can't actually use anything that is part of the word. And then you're trying to get them to guess what the words are. And, you know, you can make it like a fun activity just to kind of break up some monotony, 3-4 words at a time, something that's just fun to kind of get kids up and down. Graphic organizers are just super key in math. I mean, they're good in every subject, but this type of chart here, they call it a word pair or relationship chart. I've also seen it called like a comparison chart, or there's another word that's not coming to my mind right now. Sorry. I think I have it later in here, but this is great for review also, and practicing. So if you have them put a word in the middle and they can literally just think of any word that comes to mind that might, you know, have some sort of correlation to the word that's in the middle. So, so you want to make sure that when you do graphic organizers with students that actually they are not very busy. Research has shown that the busier the actual graphic organizer is, the more it can actually distract students from the learning. So you want to make sure that there's a point to what you're having them do. You want to make sure that they're understanding the connections between the words, and that they are genuinely making the connection themselves too. They're not just copying what you might have as yours or what another student might have. So some things that you want to think about when you are actually planning. Okay, you want to think about to yourself, do you consider vocabulary when you are planning your unit? Are you specifically thinking about what are those tier 3 words that are going to be really important to this unit? Those are the words that you want to explicitly teach to students. Okay, are you considering accommodations for students with IEPs, students with 504s, students that are in the English language population? Okay, again, are you directly instructing and supporting the vocabulary that is going to be content specific to that unit? Okay, these are things that you want to think about in your planning, or for any of you that actually write curriculum, very important to have this in your unit plans. Okay, so my challenge for you is, as you're looking at your curriculum and your programs that you currently use for this upcoming school year, I want you to think differently about the vocabulary. So not just the vocabulary that they tell you to pay attention to, like if you're using, one of the programs and it says, okay, well, these are the 10 vocabulary words that students need to know in this unit. Really look at those 10 words and say to yourself, do they know what 4 of them are already? Are they review words? And if they are, then, treat them as review words and hone in on the ones that are really new and that they might not know what they are in the math content area. Okay, and again, I talked about, what tier would they be, and identify lessons where vocabulary is important and where it needs to be reinforced. So I cut that one short because I want to make sure that if anybody has questions, that we can open up the floor and whatnot. But again, you guys have all seen this evaluation slide. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And there's only one more session, but you can feel free to click on the schedule so you can see. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. And then if anybody wants to unmute or ask any questions or has comments, or if you want to talk about your own vocabulary instruction and maybe things that work well for you that you can share with the group, that would be awesome.
I think this is Kathy.
Kathy, how are you?
Good. I think I work with 1st through 8th graders who need remedial math support in non-public schools. And I think sometimes it's just reminding the kids that they have to treat vocabulary like they would in any other content area. They tend to think, oh, but it's numbers, it's math, I don't have to worry about this. So I loved your version of the Freyer method. I've been like crossing out the non-example box. But yeah, I think they have to kind of own that they need to study it like another subject area. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it has to be just as important for them to know math, and it should be important from, the little ones on up. One of the things that, and Dr. Powell mentioned this, Dr. Vanderheyden said a little bit about it as well, but it is extremely important for students to know what the appropriate and correct math terms are. Like, yeah, it's great to show kids tricks like greater gator. Okay, if you want to show them that at some point in time, fine. But make sure that you then transition to what it is to be greater than or less than. Because if they only know greater gator or big fish eats little fish, when they get into middle school especially, and you throw negative numbers in there, you're dooming them for failure of not understanding what that means. So there's all kinds of things that, sound cutesy and sound fun, but, we just have to remember that it's important for them to know what the real math terms are. They can, like I said, they can say things like hippopotamus. They can know what a hypotenuse is.
And the doodle part, I just have to add, they do love, like sometimes I will say, okay, you make the drawing so you remember the word. And I love to see what they come up with. That's, so
I know, because sometimes it's things you would never think of, right?
And sometimes it's great for quelling their misconceptions as well. They're like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. Thank you. Anybody else want to share anything maybe that works well in their classroom that we didn't talk about, or anything that you might have had questions about that we didn't address?
One thing that I've done is with like the word wall type words, I have like the word and stuff with the picture and everything. And the day that it's in the lesson, I put it up on the front board and then I use that to reference it. And then I move it to the word wall kind of thing and go by units. And the students really like that because they like the pictures and things like that. And they do reference them. And I've tried that the last few years. And I feel like that's worked really well because I've been saying like there's such a strong connection between the math vocabulary and actually understanding things. And I teach 4th grade, so we're kind of moving out of like the cutesy terms and things like that. And I feel like sometimes that's hard, you know, because they remember those terms from younger grades and then trying to build on those and stuff. So that's worked well for me.
Good, thank you. I've also seen teachers have, and I think I did it one year too, as like a bulletin board project or something, but if you have them create the word wall, sometimes that can, again, really make them own it and understand what some of the words really mean. So then, you know, again, like you said, Erin, they're owning the words. So that might be just another suggestion too. If you have students in your class that are very artistic, and again, this is if you're going back face to face, some of us might not have that option of having a word wall, unless you just want to make one in your house, like behind you. You could do that. It's fine.
I like Erin's idea of the cards, but then also have the kids having a set so they could sort of sort. Like here's I've done that one time where they had operation words and then answer words, product sum, you know, that type of thing. And they had to do a quick sort, not necessarily a wrong answer, but how would they organize these words into what categories?
It's good. And when you do things like that, you'll see the multiple answers that kids might have. And again, you can pick up either on misconceptions or something that maybe you didn't even think about as a connection. And then you're like, oh yeah. Anybody else want to volunteer any info? Okay, well then I will give you plenty of time to take a break, stretch maybe a little bit, walk around or something. I know I'm going to do that until the last session comes up. But if anybody needs anything, please reach out. You know, we do a lot of this vocabulary stuff for TAC. We can come to your district, you know, or if it's virtual, you know, we can provide it. But thank you very much for attending. And if you need anything, please let us know. So good luck with school this year and enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.